The knock on my door came exactly one day after my neighbor buried her husband. That alone should tell you this story was never going to be simple. My name is James Carter. I am 32 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Denver, Colorado. I work as a corporate accountant, the kind of job where days blend together behind spreadsheets and emails. I am not flashy or exciting. Most nights, I eat dinner alone, watch a game or read a few pages of a book, and go to bed early. I liked that life. I liked knowing what each day would look like before it even started. Right next door lived Eliza Matthews. She was 36, with calm green eyes and a kind of quiet beauty that never tried too hard. She carried herself with this steady presence that made people notice her even when she barely spoke. She was married to Mark, an older guy, late 40s maybe. We exchanged polite hellos over the years, nothing more. They kept to themselves. Mark always looked rushed, like he was already late to wherever he was going next. Eliza was the opposite. When she spoke, even briefly, it felt like the world slowed down. Then last week Mark died, a sudden heart attack. One minute he was alive, the next he was gone. The news spread through the neighborhood in hours. Police cars, whispered conversations, people standing in small groups pretending not to stare. I did not attend the funeral. It did not feel like my place. The next afternoon, around 4 o'clock, while I was working from home in sweatpants and a hoodie, I heard the knock. When I opened the door, Eliza stood on my porch in a long black coat. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes red and tired. She held a small cup in both hands. Tea, or coffee maybe, like it was something solid she could hold on to. "Hi, James," she said softly. "Do you mind if I come in for a minute?" Of course, I let her in. I made tea and offered her the couch. I did not ask questions. She sat there quietly, staring at the steam rising from her cup. The silence was long, but it did not feel uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. "It's too quiet next door," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it, but I don't want to be alone right now." I nodded. I told her she did not need to explain. We sat there like that for a while, just two people sharing silence. Then, she started talking about Mark, about how their marriage had not been perfect, how over the last few years they had grown distant, how sometimes she felt more like his roommate than his wife. She did not cry. It felt more like she was slowly letting truth leak out, piece by piece. "I know this sounds awful," she said, looking at me, "but part of me feels like I already grieved him before he died. Like I lost him emotionally a long time ago. I did not try to fix anything. I just listened." Before she left, she glanced around my living room and gave a small smile. "It's warm here," she said. Then she was gone, back to her empty house. The next morning, I could not focus on work. Her voice, her words, the way she held that cup, like it was anchoring her to the world, stayed with me. Around noon, another knock came. It was Eliza again. This time she wore jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie that looked like it had been worn for days. No makeup. In her hands were 2 brown paper bags from the deli down the street. "I figured you forgot to eat," she said with a faint smile. "Thought I'd bring lunch." She stepped inside like it was natural, like she belonged there. And somehow, it felt that way. We ate on the back patio under a gray sky. At first, we did not talk. Eventually, she broke the silence. "I thought I'd feel more devastated," she said. "But instead I just feel empty, like I'm living someone else's life." She told me how lonely she had been long before Mark died, how they shared a house but not a connection, how grief had started years ago without her realizing it. "Have you ever felt like you were disappearing in your own home?" she asked. I nodded. I understood the loneliness, even if I had not lived her exact story. For the next hour, we talked about simple things. Movies. Coffee shops. Dumb mistakes. I told her about the time I sent a company-wide email with a terrible typo. She laughed, really laughed, and for the first time, she looked like someone who still had joy left. At one point, her hand brushed mine on the table. It stayed there for a second, long enough for both of us to notice. Then she pulled back. "I should go," she said suddenly. "This is probably too soon." "You're not doing anything wrong," I told her. "You don't have to be alone." She hesitated at the door, then nodded. Something had shifted between us. Nothing physical had happened. No kiss, no embrace. But something unspoken had started, and I knew it was not going away. That night after Eliza left, the house felt different. Not empty, just aware. Like it remembered her sitting on the patio, her quiet voice, the way she looked at me when she asked if it was wrong to be there. I slept, but not deeply. My mind kept circling back to her, to that brief touch of hands that lasted only a second, but somehow felt heavier than it should have. The next morning was cloudy again, the kind of gray that presses down on everything. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that went cold in my hands. I tried to read emails, but my eyes kept drifting toward the window that faced her backyard. I told myself I was not looking for her. She stood near the edge of her porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold something in place. She looked small, lost, like she was standing on the edge of a decision she did not know how to make. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then came the knock. I knew it was her before I opened the door. Eliza stood there in a navy blue sweater that slipped slightly off one shoulder and black leggings. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. Her eyes looked tired, but there was something intense in them, like she had been thinking for a long time. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside without hesitation. She walked into the living room slower than before, like she was unsure she should be there. She stood for a moment, scanning the room like it might give her an answer. "I wasn't planning to come," she said. "I went back and forth for an hour. I didn't know where else to go." "You don't need a reason," I said gently. She sat down on the couch and curled in on herself, knees tucked up, arms wrapped around them. I sat across from her, giving her space. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. "I don't know how to be alone," she said finally. "I went from my parents' house straight to living with Mark. I've never really lived by myself." I nodded slowly. "That kind of change is hard." She let out a long breath. "The thing is, I felt alone even when he was alive. For years. I think that's what scares me." That I already did the hardest part without realizing it. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel guilty being here?" she asked. "Talking to you like this so soon?" I took my time answering. I wanted to be careful. "I don't think there's a timeline for grief," I said. "And I don't think connection is something you're supposed to refuse just because it shows up early." Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she had been holding her breath. "I don't want to go back there tonight," she said. "Not because I'm running away. I just can't sit in that house again. I feel like I'm going to suffocate." I believed her. There was no drama in her voice, no exaggeration, just honesty. "You can stay here," I said. "I'll set up the guest room." Her eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. "I didn't expect you to say that." "You're not alone," I said. She nodded, a small smile breaking through. That evening passed quietly. I made chamomile tea. She sat on the couch while I pulled clean sheets from the closet and made up the spare room. We did not talk much. The silence felt safe. Before heading to bed, she came back into the living room. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not asking too many questions, for making me feel like a person again." Then she hugged me. It was not romantic, it was not rushed, it was human. Her head rested against my shoulder and I held her steady, like that was all she needed in that moment. "Good night," she whispered. I did not sleep much. Not because anything happened. Nothing did, but I was aware of her presence down the hall, aware of the weight she carried, aware that this was not just a neighbor sleeping in my guest room. In the morning, I woke early and made coffee. I stood by the window watching light spill over the fence. Her footsteps came softly down the hall. She appeared wrapped in a gray blanket, hair messy, face bare and tired, but real in a way that caught me off guard. "Morning," she said. "Hey," I replied. I made coffee. We stood there sipping in silence. It was not awkward, it was calm. "I have no idea what I'm doing," she said eventually. "I don't think you're supposed to," I said. "You're just getting through the next minute." She nodded. Being here feels like I can breathe. She stayed that day, and something told me this was only the beginning. Eliza stayed that entire day. There was no plan and no conversation about what it meant. She just stayed. We moved around each other slowly, like two people learning a new rhythm. I made scrambled eggs and toast. She helped without asking, standing beside me at the counter, handing me plates, smiling softly when I almost burned the toast. After breakfast, we sat in the living room while sunlight crept across the floor. She pulled her knees up on the couch and held her mug with both hands. I sat close, not touching, but near enough to feel her warmth. "I haven't felt this calm in a long time," she said quietly, like I'm allowed to just exist. "You are," I said. "You always were." She looked at me then, and there was something deeper in her eyes. Not romance, not confusion, just honesty. She told me more about her marriage, how Mark's work slowly took over everything, how conversations became short and distant, how she would sit at the dinner table alone, even when he was in the same house. How loneliness can grow, even when someone sleeps beside you every night. "I didn't even realize how empty I'd become," she said. "I thought this was just what life turned into." I listened. That was all she needed. In the afternoon, we folded laundry together. She laughed when she found a pink sock mixed in with my whites. Later, we took a slow walk around the neighborhood. We did not hold hands, but we walked close enough that our arms brushed now and then. Neither of us pulled away. That evening, I made pasta. Simple. Nothing special. We ate at the table, talking about nothing important. It felt easy, familiar in a way that surprised me. Later, we sat on the couch with a nature show playing softly in the background. She tucked her legs beneath her and leaned back into the cushions. I sat beside her, close but careful. "It's strange," she said after a while. "I don't feel bad being here." And I thought I would. "I don't think that's something to feel bad about," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I did not move away. My arm rested around her naturally, like it had done this before. The room was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty. She lifted her head and looked at me. Our faces were closer than they had ever been. I could feel her breath. She hesitated, like she was asking a question without words. Then she leaned in. The kiss was soft, careful, short. It felt more like a moment of understanding than anything else. She pulled back almost immediately. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," I said. We did not kiss again. She rested against my chest, and we stayed like that for a long time, listening to the quiet. After that night, things did not rush forward. Eliza went back to sleeping in her own house. She said she needed to face it, to sort through things. I understood. But she came over every day, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit. There were days she cried, and days she laughed. Slowly, I saw her change. Her eyes started to hold something lighter. Not happiness, not yet, but hope. And without realizing it, I was changing too. About a month later, she invited me over for dinner. I felt nervous walking into her house for the first time since everything happened. The air was different now. Less heavy. Like she had opened windows that had been shut for years. She cooked pasta. We ate on the back patio as the sun went down. The evening was cool and quiet. "I think I'm ready," she said suddenly. "Ready for what?" I asked. "Ready to move forward," she said. "Not forget. Just continue." She reached across the table and took my hand. It felt right. "When I picture the future," she said softly, "you're in it." I squeezed her hand gently. "We'll take it slow." She smiled, a real smile. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer just about grief. It was about what came after, waiting to be chosen. From that night on, nothing changed all at once, and somehow that made everything feel more real. We did not rush into anything. There was no sudden move, no dramatic decision. We just kept choosing each other in small, quiet ways. Coffee in the mornings, walks after dinner, long talks that drifted from serious to silly without either of us noticing the shift. It felt natural, like something that had been growing without us forcing it. Eliza was still grieving. I could see it in the quiet moments, in the way her voice softened when Mark's name came up, in the days when she needed space. I never tried to pull her away from that. I stayed beside her instead. Some days she leaned on me, other days she stood on her own. Both felt right. Slowly, her house stopped feeling heavy. She repainted a room, gave away clothes that no longer felt like hers, opened windows, and let air move through spaces that had been closed for too long. Each small change felt like a step forward. One evening, months later, I stayed the night at her place for the first time. There was nothing dramatic about it. We fell asleep talking, her head on my chest, my arm around her. It felt steady, safe. That was when I understood what this really was. It was not about replacing anyone. It was not about filling a gap. It was about two people meeting each other at a moment when honesty mattered more than timing. A year later, we were sitting on my porch as the sun set. She leaned into me, her hand resting in mine like it had always belonged there. "I used to think my life was over," she said quietly. "Now I think it was just waiting." I kissed her forehead and smiled. Sometimes love does not arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it knocks softly right after a door closes and asks if it can come in. And if you let it, it changes everything.